Hey everyone, thank you to be here with us today. Welcome to CatchARQ. I'm Mel, I'm with Indra, and we have today an amazing guest, Kavita. We research a lot about your profile, Kavita, and we are amazed with a lot of things that you have done. So thank you for being here today. Well, let's get started. Let's CatchARQ together.
Sounds good.
Well, in that sense, we of course would like to get into the very beginning of your career. And one of the questions that we are most thrilled to know about is what attracted you from architecture? Like, what is it that you said, oh, this moment I said, I'm going to be an architect? Or it did not exist?
I don't think that moment existed for me. It was more like I came to architecture as an accident. So as a kid, I think I was just very good at drawing, and I was really interested in the arts and fashion, and I don't design clothes now, but I was just interested in those kind of things, and I actually thought I would be a fashion designer.
Oh, nice.
Something to do with that. But then life sort of took me in a different direction. And my parents are very Indian parents. And I don't know if you know how Indian parents can be.
Actually, no.
No.
You only have three kinds of options. You can either be a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer. And all three of these things I did not want to be. So I got into architecture because I did not want to do any of these things. And it was like you give an exam, and everyone across the state is giving this exam. And then you get a rank based on your score, and I got a really bad rank. So you go up to a scoreboard and you select this, where do you want to go and study and what do you want to study, and that's for engineering and medicine. And so when I was doing it, I literally went up and I knew that I wanted to be in a place called Manipal, because it was very famous for its education in India. But also it's a really fun place because it's a lot of young people out there and stuff like that. So I knew I wanted to go there. But I knew I didn't want to do medicine or engineering. And the only thing that was left for me on that board was architecture. So I picked it. And I was like, I'll figure it out. But I'm going to be in Manipal. I'm going to enjoy myself. So that's how I landed in architecture. But I think I really began to enjoy it. And a reason for that, for also coming to, I guess, sort of selecting it like that, because I just didn't know what I wanted to do, to be honest, at that time. So I think the board sort of selecting, and I knew what I didn't want to do, and ending up in architecture, that worked out well. But I think my interest in architecture only came within my 4th or 5th year of architecture.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, and that's when I started feeling like, wow, I can actually be good at this.
Yeah.
Designing and thinking and conceptually and things like that. So I think that was kind of the genesis into architecture. But I think I was also not just interested in architecture from just being about doing your drawings and doing your 3D renderings and then seeing a building coming up. No, I was more interested in things beyond that, like, the arts and graphics and interaction design, how people interact with spaces, and research. How do you research spaces? So the stuff that happens between the walls was kind of a key focus, and that's kind of been like a running thread in everything I do now.
And did you find, for example, at university a place to research and to be involved with that kind of interest that you
I
have?
think that research came into my life also a bit later on. I was introduced to it during my architectural degree, and I think architectural degree in India is still like 5 years. But it was 5 years, and I think I was introduced to it in my final year research, and I loved it. I loved reading the research papers. And then, we had a semester where we do thesis. And my thesis was completely focused on research. And obviously there was a design component, but it was very focused. So my focus was on designing a residential educational school.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I actually went and visited educational schools. I did surveys, I had interviews. So that was kind of where I touched it first, and then research came a little later. Not that late into my career, but it came a little later when I went off to do a master's and everything.
But probably you were doing research way more than any of your classmates in that moment. If you were doing all this kind of interaction with schools,
I think when I love a thing, I really want to know everything about it. So, and I don't think I would use the word passion for it. I think it would be obsession.
Oh, nice.
I love it. I'm
Yeah,
the same.
yes, it
I'm
is.
Yeah, I had an absolute obsession with it, so much that I remember that my thesis supervisor, my bachelor thesis supervisor, who's Shri Kumar Menon, he basically told me, you need to put down the pen and stop working. Like, take a break for like a week. I took a break for a month, though. But he told me to take a break for a week. And I was just like, no, I'm not ready for a break. But then I think it was good advice. Yeah, it was good advice.
Yeah.
Because I was just loving it so much and I just wanted to keep doing stuff. So, yeah. And I think another thing that really, I think, influenced the way I started thinking about architecture was when this was slightly before my thesis, and it also informed the way I would think about my thesis and represent it, was that we had exchange students who came from Germany, 2 of them. And I think that was really influential to see how they were representing design, how they were doing design. And I was introduced to like a really, at that time, it seemed very new to me. It wasn't new, but it was very new to me to see how they were working and how they designed. And how they were showcasing 3D skills, for example. Because I was never good at sketching. I'm good at conceptual sketching, but not like, what is it, like photorealistic sketching?
This artistic that shows you how it's going to be, like the client like, here it is.
Yeah, exactly. This beautiful sketch. And, you know, like there's a nice 3D perspective of you. That was not a strength of mine. And what I saw with them was that they were very good at the computer, like Photoshop. That was when I was first introduced to Photoshop, I think, with them. And so I took to that very easily because I learned so much from them, and I really began to love it more because I suddenly found a tool where I could express myself, express my thinking.
Yes, yeah. It's exactly that. So you started scratching with hand, like a hand sketch?
Well, you learn all these things like the architectural graphics, the tools and all. I don't think I was very good at like drawing to scale, like just by hand. I was good at drawing, but I guess like when it came to the architectural stuff, I just wasn't very good at doing freehand. So I really needed the tools to support it.
Yeah, sure.
So, you know, like at that time, everything was hand drafting and things like that. And then in my 4th year and 5th year was when we were introduced to computers and how we could use computers to like, you know, do your 3D Max and, you know, AutoCAD. And it was just so exciting when those tools came up. And I was just like, wow, this is making my life easier.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the same. That's a huge help, definitely.
Yeah. It depends on the approach. In my case, for example, I start doing a sketch by hand, and after that, it's like
I think it's the same for me.
Yeah.
I do a completely conceptual sketch of, you know, the idea and the big idea and things like that. And then I take it to the computer.
Yeah, sure.
I don't ever skip this step. I think this thing of, you know, translating from hand to paper is very, very important.
Yeah.
I don't see enough of it nowadays, but for me, at least as a process, that's quite important. And then I begin to translate that into computer because, you know, it needs to look nice.
Of course.
You need fonts and, you know, whatever.
And
So,
faster.
All the beautiful aesthetic things of the design.
Yeah.
Great. And then moving on, in that sense, what was your first professional experience? How was meaningful to you? You have kind of a story about it or
yeah, I mean, now it's a story. So my first professional experience was my internship. So in my 5 years of degree, you actually go off for 1 semester to do an internship. And I don't know if that's the same everywhere else, but in India, that's what they used to do. And so I went and did an internship with architect Sarto Almeida. And he's quite a famous, he was in this town called Madgaon, Goa. And he's a modernist. He has worked with Louis Kahn,
nice.
B.V. Doshi, like, you know, your Indian masters, your European masters, very influenced by Le Corbusier. And he came back to Goa and he started his own practice. And he did lots of work in Goa because Goa is kind of a small place. And he did all these churches, schools, urban design. And in India, there isn't that distinction between, if you're an architect, doesn't mean that you can't do interior design. You actually do everything.
Yes,
you figure out.
It's the same for us.
Yeah.
It's the same for us. We design everything.
Yeah.
As the journalists as well, everything. Yeah, but I love it.
Yeah, I love it. And
maybe for us just furniture that maybe can go out.
But that's not impossible, that's a smaller
Exactly.
scale. I mean,
Yeah.
you still need the rules of the game, sort of, but not
Yeah.
impossible. So he would do everything. And when I joined him, he was 82 years old and he was still running his practice. But I learned so much from him because he would draw on, everything was, again, at his office, everything was still hand drafting. And he would draft with pencil on gateway paper. Do you know what gateway paper is?
No.
It's better quality paper than tracing paper. And
But it's really thin, right?
it's really
Yes,
thin and
yes.
transparent. And he would draft on that with pencil, which is wild.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
we used to have something called rotring pens.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he'd do some of it with that, but he would draft with pencil. And according to him, I was really bad at drafting because the pencil would smudge everywhere. I would just make a mess, But it was really good to see like his dedication, how he engaged with the community, where he lived. He had a beautiful house, which he completely renovated himself. But, to have that experience, I don't think I could take that away.
Sure.
It was so interesting. It was just so interesting
One
to be
lifetime experience.
Yeah.
And like with the eyes of a recently graduated person.
Yeah. And, he was the master of his time. And he came from what was considered pretty high caliber architects,
Yeah.
So it was just exciting to be there. I'm even surprised he accepted me as an intern, but I wrote like a note and I submitted it. And even when I did my final report on the internship, everything was handwritten and hand drafted, messy, but still in that. And it was kind of it was really nice to have done that. Yeah.
Really good experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to see dedication, because dedication to the craft, I think. And he loved what he was doing. So it was just really, everyone wants a piece of that when they, when you love what you're doing. So,
Yes, of course.
It was really nice to be around that.
How old was he?
He
was still working. So that's
He
passion.
was still working. Yeah, I think he was 82 because it was a joke at that time that I was quarter his age when I was there. And everyone, like all the other colleagues, would, like make fun. And everyone was just so kind. It was just a really nice space to be. Yeah.
I love it. Well, you have been engaged with different kind of cultures and different contexts, as you mentioned before. So what was the biggest challenge that you have, for example, in different countries or different languages? Do you have any story or that you can mention?
Oh, everything. Because I did different degrees in different countries. So each of them came with their own kind of challenges. So when I did my bachelor degree, that was in India. And then I worked for a couple of years in India. And I think I got pretty jaded with the industry. And by then I was pretty interested in sustainable architecture. And I really wanted to go and study that. So I applied to the Glasgow School of Art and I did a Master of Architecture over there. I was there for a year. But when I finished my degree, I basically landed in an economic recession. There were no jobs. So I took up, at that time, while I was also cleaning and things like that, I worked in a theater, movie theater, cleaning and stuff. Once I finished my degree, there was no job. And at that time, you could stay a little bit longer in the UK. I got that extra visa, whatever that was, the postgraduate visa. And I started working in Marks and Spencer's, which is a slightly high-end supermarket over there.
Oh, look at
So
that.
I was bagging groceries, and then I moved to the cafe. I mean, I sort of got elevated to the cafe. Cafe is hard work. And, went to the cafe, and there were just no jobs for architects at that time. And nobody would accept someone on a visa as well. So it was quite
It's
tough.
hard. Yes,
Yeah,
it's
it was
hard.
really, really tough. But I think those 6-7 months that I did that job, I think because I was very shy, and nobody will believe that now, but I was very, very shy and I did not want to talk to anyone. I was just awkward and things. I'm still awkward, but maybe not shy. So in Marks and Spencer's, we give every staff training on how to work with customers. How do you talk to them? What do you say? Things like that. I learned a lot from that, like how to talk to people, like even making coffee, which would send me in a bout of anxiety because at one point I did not know the difference between a latte or a cappuccino,
Like 10 coffees and you just came to having black coffee and
Yeah. Suddenly there's a
options.
repertoire and you have to make it. And, and you have to move between making the coffee to making food, heating up food, then throwing it out. Then you need to know the rules around food and stuff like that. So it was, and, dishwashing and all of that. I feel like it built a bone of resilience. And it also, I think it gave me confidence to talk to people, which was something that I was very shy about. And then since I was not getting a job in Glasgow, I decided to do another degree, kind of like another degree in Helsinki. So now I moved to Helsinki where there were people speak English, but the predominant language is Finnish. It's difficult to get a job without knowing Finnish. Yeah. It's not impossible, but it is difficult. And so I moved there, and then it was hard for me to get a job over there, but I was doing this amazing course, Creative Sustainability, and they were test driving the course at that time, and I was part of that. And I was just so excited because I was getting to know all these different people across different disciplines. I was talking to economists, I was talking to engineers, all students, but, from different disciplines. And the way they had designed the courses were also that you had to interact with them and work with them. It was amazing. It was just super exciting, but I couldn't get a job. So what I did instead, what kind of happened instead was I worked on a community project over there. It's a community arts project where it's called Multicolored Dreams. It's now gone on to become a street art group. But at that time it was a community project, and that was something I did. And what I learned from that was if you ask people for what you want, you're most likely to get it. Because we formed this community project where we needed to actually use street surfaces, the construction sites. They would cover it up with plywood. And the plywood was just plain. There was nothing on it. So one of us came up with the idea that we would actually put some art on it. Why not? Street art onto it. And so we actually worked with the people who own the construction sites to get permission, to get artists to actually put their works on it. And we did all kinds of arts on it. It was really fun.
Wow.
I did one piece, which was around the parliament. And that was the wildest thing for me. I know I'm saying wild a lot, but now in hindsight, that was pretty cool. Because to get that permission was very, very cool. It just literally was a phone call. And I was just we have this project and can we do it? They're like, yeah, just send us an email. In any other country, I don't know whether this was possible. I don't think it's possible now also. And they were like, yeah, just send us an email. I'm like, really? Just an email? It's like, yeah, just send us an email. And we wrote an email and we had a process in place and all of that. So it worked really well. And yeah, it was just super exciting. So I didn't get a job over there, but I did this kind of work, which I feel, again, with interacting with people in the parliament and things like that, just sort of gave me again, a lot of confidence to be able to talk to people and find a way to do things.
Well, it's a really important skill.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Architecture is very collective.
Absolutely. Facilitation, right? Mm-hmm. Collaboration.
Yes.
And how do you work with people who are difficult?
Yes.
How do you get what you need to get to when people are difficult, or the situation's difficult?
And when you're making up whatever job and someone doesn't want that, you don't have the permission, or someone doesn't want to work with this other one, and
absolutely.
You have to be flexible. Yes.
Yeah, but it also teaches you exactly how to be flexible and how to adapt.
Different kind of backgrounds as well, because it's not the same to talk with a client or to talk with someone who is involved with some kind of
trades
yes.
The government or
absolutely. And one of my favorite things was that all the material that we needed for to paint and spray paints and stuff like that, the vendors gave it to us for free. And, I don't think it's possible now again. But at that time, they just gave everything to us for free. They were just so excited that we were doing something like this, and we had the community involved, the arts community involved, and the students involved. So I guess from then I was just like, I just need to ask. People can say no, but I need to ask. So I think that was, another lesson over there. So I guess, there are challenges, and then there were like these offsets to the challenges, right?
Yeah, sure.
And then I landed in India, and I worked in different places. I was doing sustainability consulting with this company called EDS Global. And during that time, I also did another community project called the Bake Collective. And that was the entire time that I was there. That's kind of what happened. Because then I moved to another city, and I was working with Gensler. And I was doing a lot of research to design. So again, research came back into my life when I joined Gensler. And that was something I really, really wanted to do. And I was doing workplace research and looking at translating how we translate research into actual application. How do you apply it in the real world? And that was very good to see how they actually work with different kinds of stakeholders. Like, how do you work with the CEO of, like, I don't know, Microsoft, for example? And then how do you translate what this guy is dreaming about into a design outcome? So it was...
This kind of language. Is it a language as well?
So the different languages and who you're talking to. Absolutely. Yeah. And, the ability to be adaptable and flexible. I think that's kind of what the journey has kind of made. Like, in some ways, I think of myself as a chameleon. I think just from the fact that I grew up, I didn't even grow up in India, even though I'm Indian. I grew up in Bahrain, and there was like fusion of different cultures over there. So I feel like from there, it's been the ability to sort of move between different cultures, but also the ability to take what is really good and leave out the stuff that's not great. Yeah. Not every every culture has their pros and cons. So
sure.
Yeah. Human. Yeah, we're human.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. That's very interesting. Now I'm going to try to focus the conversation for a little bit on one of those things that you have said, is the sustainability insurance that you have. We would like to know more, what is that approach of sustainability that you think you see in architecture has a role into it, like can do really change or move architects to actually, the construction industry is very contaminating one. It's very like the things we do has an impact for long term in very dimensions, and one of those is the environmental one. So we would like to know more about it.
Yeah, sure. I think you said a great thing about the industry being pretty contaminate the environment. So one thing that all architects, anyone in the sustainable architecture field, will keep throwing a stat at you, which is that building and construction industry globally contributes around 40% of the carbon emissions in the world. And that was like a 2019 stat, and I don't think that has changed. It might be more even. So I think you're absolutely right that there is a problem with the industry and in the way we design and the way we build. And the way we design and the way we build is assuming that everything is new. Everything needs to be new, and everything is new. And unfortunately, with the onset of artificial lighting and mechanical systems, the way we design our buildings have changed as well. We design as if a building that is a glass building that would perhaps work for Chicago is the same kind of architecture that should be built in India, for example, or Australia. And it makes no sense that none of these buildings are actually responding to the climate anymore.
Or orientation, even.
Orientation is my favorite topic. It drives me nuts that people still don't put the north sign. And that is pretty telling that we don't put the north sign anymore, because it means that we don't have to care about it. We can design a building anyhow and anywhere, and somehow the systems will make it work, right? We have all these mechanical, artificial systems that are making it work. So I think, yes, there is a problem with the industry, and I do want to bring it back to the fact that architecture has normally been in service of society. Unfortunately, our society is a capitalistic one, so architecture is reflecting that. So I think that when we talk about sustainable architecture in the kind of society that we're in, it is filled with contradictions. Because on one hand, we know that, for example, everyone talks about materials being low carbon or decarbonizing. or, having this vague number over how much carbon emissions you're going to release out into the atmosphere. But what does that really mean? This kind of number feels a bit artificial to me because it doesn't really translate the sort of holistic view of what architecture is. It doesn't talk about how people are impacted by what we're designing and what we're building, where the materials are coming from, and our communities actually being impacted by this extractive behavior, right? Which is part of this capitalistic society, because capitalism requires you to extract and sell, and you remit value. Yeah, it's a cycle.
Yeah.
And so we're part of that cycle, right? And in our domain. So I think of sustainable architecture as care work in design. And by care work, I mean, like what nurses do, what our mothers do. We care about the impact. We care about what it's going to mean. So I think it's not enough to just care about the carbon emissions because it's kind of invisible. We also have to care about how communities are impacted by this, also how biodiversity, because if there is a breakdown in our ecology, humans are not going to survive because of that. So we really need to expand the definition of sustainability to actually care in architecture and design. We need to care about it.
Yes, sometimes I'm feeling like it's a slogan, what is related to sustainability today, because it's a paradigm, but actually it is happening. You know what I mean? All the university all the projects are based on sustainability.
Yeah,
but even after that, what's going on?
I think there's a disjunct where some parts are able to move really quickly and pick this up, like schools and things like that, universities, and I would say certain parts in the industry as well. But I think the industry is quite used to doing things in a certain way. And if you know anything about change management, you can't change everybody. It's very difficult. You have to do them in steps. So it's sort of like the step change sort of framework. But
replacing, like I start with this step and by replacing this one.
Yes,
make
absolutely.
sure that everything articulates and then the next one.
Absolutely, but also thinking of architecture as not as a single house or a unit, but actually part of a system, part of an ecology that, the house needs to feed into where it is and do something good for it. Right now, the house is kind of like an environment which blocks out the outside. What if there was a way for the house to be a membrane that actually feeds the outside and the inside and builds a connection between the inside and the outside? I don't know. These are ideas.
Yeah, I like it.
And humans, women, kids, everybody, we do better when we are actually connected to nature. Because everyone's talking about biophilic design and biomimicry and all of those things. That's just a sign that we really need to be connected back to nature much better. So everyone is talking about regenerative design, where design actually, whatever we design actually improves the places. And I think that's great. We have First Nations people here in Australia, and there's so much we can learn from them about how they really care for country and what that means in design and translating that into design.
Well, I see it like from the positive point, where I think more people is getting really aware of this and trying to introduce this kind of bits and pieces.
Absolutely,
we need to do more probably, but as well, stop thinking like a trending thing now, because capitalism exactly is a lot about getting, like we said before, like under the cut of the rules, but as well understanding the architecture and its own nature of being a little bit more permanent somehow, at least in the environments that we build for daily routine and stuff, more than, I don't know, we have ephemeral stuff as well, but the main core is kind of long-term things.
Yeah.
It's more like a trend, and it's very interesting that we're starting to understand that we're doing, that we start to make click with that long-term designs, and we're very aware of the long-term of our designs with this, that is not a trend anymore. We're not talking about environment as a trend anymore. We're not talking about understanding the architecture object out of a system anymore. We're starting to understand that it's just part of the roots of what we are trying to do.
Yeah, I don't think that we have too much time. It's now that we have to make a change.
Yeah, I don't know about those of the times. Well, maybe that would be for another episode. Human is very resourceful. Like,
Yeah, it's very resourceful, but I think you're also right about the time. There is a deep urgency to do something now, and like some people like to say yesterday.
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
there's a deep urgency to do
Yeah.
that because we've in the last year we've actually crossed the 1.5 degrees Celsius. We were trying to keep it to 1.5 degrees Celsius
Yeah.
globally, but we've actually crossed it, and we're going to now find out what are the repercussions of that. And climate change is not a new thing. It's been around forever. It's just
Yeah.
that it's pretty accelerated right now. And so we're seeing a lot of change in our weather patterns. And when there's change in our weather patterns, that means we're going to have problems with our food systems because they're affected by rain, etc., like that. If there's a problem with our food systems, that means there's going to be shortage of food. If there's shortage of food, it can be breakdown of societies. And that means we're going to have this really large gap between the poor and the rich. Who can keep the people out because they're rich in the resources and they can pay for less resources that there are very little of, and then you're going to be separated out. So I clearly watch a lot of science fiction movies. So I think there's a lot of truth in there.
Yeah.
How society can break down because of that. It's kind of already happening with our current geopolitical situation right now with all the
Yes.
current interesting leaders that we're getting on board. So yeah, where they're
Yes.
securing resources as much as they can.
When we see the movie, sometimes everything makes sense, right?
Yeah,
It's like
absolutely.
it doesn't look like it's a fiction.
that reminds me of the pandemic. Like, I remember watching those memes saying, I would never criticize again a director for a pandemic movie, like choices.
Yeah.
And after the whole COVID thing, I went back and watched one of those. And I was like, yeah, it just happened. So
Yeah.
just to give an example of
Yeah.
how they can really show realities. Well, I don't know. I really like to try to keep positive about it. No, I'm really
Yes, of
scared.
course,
I mean, it's
of
true.
course.
It's true. What you're saying, like,
Yeah, I think people really struggle that because there's a reality that's maybe coming and people want to be hopeful. And I think the hopeful needs to come in the action. And we need to repeat our actions every day, every minute, think about it all the time. And that's where we exercise hope. And somewhere, because what I like to think is that I'm not going to see this future. My grandchildren, well, I don't have grandchildren, but my nieces and my nephews and their kids are going to see this future. And a lot of our society is pretty hedonistic. They live in the moment, in the now. They're not really thinking about that future that's coming. And I think that's where some fundamental shifts have to happen because we really need to think in terms of deep time and long term, exactly like you said, like, long term, where is this going to go? The decision that I'm making today is going to play a role 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, even if you don't believe it, but it's going to have some impact. And really thinking about that is what we need to do. So, yeah, I think of hope as an action, not as a thought, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I like that, and I will connect with the next topic because you're involved with activists. What's the story behind that?
I don't know a moment where I was not an activist, if that makes any sense. I was always, I don't know whether it has something to do with my cultural upbringing or things like that. Probably cultural and religious upbringing, which I don't really respond to anymore now, but I think it has a lot to have with that deep sense of having those values and wanting things to be more than equal, talking about equity and, it's in the everyday that I also think about what it means for the climate crisis to be equitable when we're actually dealing with it. So, yeah, it's not like I remember a specific moment when I was not an activist. I was a pretty naughty kid, always.
to be honest, I love that. I love that. Yeah. No, really.
And I think I try to practice it in everything I do, like with my architecture, in the sustainability. I don't think you go into sustainability because you just want to build buildings. I think you go into it because you want to create you want to have positive impact. You don't know what that looks like, but you want to. So I think to think and to hope are probably pretty dangerous things, and you need to be dangerous. And
I
and
like that. I like that. Yeah, and to be
Coherence.
honest,
Yeah.
I believe you have a perfect mix because your profile is not only academic. You're mixing academic things, researching things, but you're making things as well. You're working on that.
Yeah, I try. Not always successful, but all you can do is try. So
Yes.
yeah, I try.
You knock a door to see if it opens.
Yeah, you gotta ask.
Yeah. I'm taking note of that.
Gotta always ask. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
I
yeah,
love
yeah.
that. Your PhD is titled Radical Placemaking. What's that? I'm so curious.
So my PhD was a lot around how people who experience marginalization, how they can utilize digital technologies to actually engage in something called placemaking. And placemaking is really the act of it's like the title. It is making place. Like for example, we're in this room together and we're sharing in the act of making. Yes, we're making a podcast together, right? So we're making something. It's ephemeral, sure, but in this moment, we're always going to remember that we were here in this room. The room might not remember that we're here, but we know that, right? But my thesis was my work was a lot around how do I make this room remember, and how do I make other people who come into this room, how can I make them see that too? So that was effectively sort of like the basis of the thesis. But I was really looking at how people can, if I can think of this room as a public space. Now, when I think of places like George Square or Cultural Center and places like that, the question for me was a lot around how I, as a migrant who might need to leave in a couple of years, how do I leave a mark over here at Cultural Center to say that I was here? I have a part of Australian history in me, and Australian history is a part of me, So really taking that, and you're really using that as the premise to actually work with different communities. And that's where I worked with Communify, actually. So my first project I did 3 projects as part of my thesis. The first one was called Chatty Bench Project, which was in Kelvin Grove. And I worked with Communify, and I worked with students, and it was done during the pandemic. Don't ask. It was done during the pandemic. It is possible. And then my second project was Transhuman Saunter, which was done at Botanic Gardens, next to QUT Gardens Point. And the third project was again done at Kelvin Grove. It was kind of an extension of the Chatty Bench project. And in all of this, it was a lot around how people can leave their stories in place using digital technology. So we really played with augmented reality, lo-fi augmented reality. Do you know the game Pokemon Go?
Yeah.
So literally, like, you would read someone's story and you're kind of trying to couch their story in different places. So you had to go to a specific place to experience what they experienced. But at the same time, you're having your own embodied experience, your own personal experience of that place. So place has played a very important role, I think, in sort of everything I do. Like, when I think about it now, for example, I selected where I would do architecture based on a place. I went to Manipal because, yeah, sure, I'd do anything there, but, And so it's kind of like this movement, and I think as someone who has moved between many places, I didn't get to leave my history in many places. Like I don't get to have a footnote in history that I was there. But through this technology, you get to do that. And so it wasn't just about me. It was other migrants who also participated in these, I would say new migrants. I don't have a better word for it, but people who had just moved to Australia as well, like me, who had been there a couple of years, still looking for a job, still looking for something. And during the pandemic, we were all locked in our houses and we had nothing to do. So this project kind of helped people cope through, the lockdowns and things like that. They were working with new digital tools. They learned a lot of skills by doing that. They spoke to each other for 10 weeks. Every week we met up and we caught up. And then in the 5th week, we actually met in person because the lockdown rules had reduced. And people could play play each other's stories with your phone. So everything was designed for the mobile phone, like Pokemon Go, kind of. And people would go around and just experience Kelvin Grove. So you're kind of experiencing Kelvin Grove in my shoes as well as in your shoes. So you're having this dual, triple experience at the same time because of that. So that was kind of the premise. I don't know if I explained that very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting. Well, I
Yes,
don't know.
it
I kind of understood that was like a photo book,
Yeah.
digital from people everywhere. So it's really nice because it's like going through a place that has history in it.
Yes,
and you can
absolutely.
actually know what happened through that history. It's not just like, oh, this is the hall where someone walked in 1920. It's not like, wow,
No.
getting to see what that person lived in 1920 while in 2025. Wow, that's very interesting.
So it's very current histories and stuff. Yeah. The one in the Botanic Gardens was more around our relationship to a tree. So in the Botanic Gardens, there's the banyan tree. It's a really big, massive tree that I've only ever seen in India or in the Indian subcontinent. But yet it is here out here in it's in Australia, but it was here in this garden. And so me and a couple of other artists explored our relationship to the tree, and all of them came from one of them was from Vietnam, another one was from Samoa because they have similar trees out there. Another one is Indian Australian. Who am I leaving out? And one is a Thai artist. So all of them created like different stories. They laid like their stories onto the whole thing of Botanic Gardens on the entire. And so you can walk through Botanic Gardens and experience. Even in Kelvin Grove, you can actually walk through all of their stories and experience them even today. So all of these still exist, and to me, they're like repositories of somebody's history, very personal histories, because people were talking about, for example, colonization and the impact of that, and religious affiliations with the tree, for example. In our cultures, this is how we think of the tree. Here, it's just a tree, but over there, it actually holds gods, for example, right? So the meaning of the tree is much more. So we started talking about how the tree is a portal to all our different histories. Yeah, it was
I like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
It was exciting.
Yeah.
Perspectives.
Well, I have a relationship with the jacarandas because
Oh, yeah,
my
yeah.
city is full of jacarandas there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
every time that I see jacaranda here, for me it's like I'm in my city again.
Yes,
I can see
yeah.
the same color, I can see the same flowers, and it's something that I'm feeling like I there again.
And you just, it's suddenly in that moment, it just takes you back.
Yeah.
And I feel like the mobile phone has the capability to do that as well. Like you receive a call from your mom, your dad, your grandmom, whatever. Suddenly you're back home. No, you're not here. And how you're transported and how the body feels transported is it's very exciting. Yeah.
Yes, this kind of sensation as well.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
It's very real. It's very there's an embodiedness that you can't replace anywhere. Yeah.
It's good for my anxiety, that. Because
all of our anxiety.
Connect me with the present.
Yeah.
We are already getting to the end of our
Oh, wow.
conversations. Been
How are we
very,
doing for
very
time?
Nice.
Yeah.
I know. Well, in this sense, I have a couple of last questions for you.
Sure thing.
The first one would be, what kind of advice would you choose to give to architects that are in this way of expand their careers internationally and check different backgrounds or cultures?
Yeah, sure. I know you like hope, but I'm going to start with no hope, all right?
Okay.
I think people, architects or anybody, needs to be really realistic when they go to another place or, they come to Australia or whatever, trying to get a job. So be really realistic that it's going to be, a lot of things are not going to work for you. For example, language can be a barrier. Your degrees are not recognized. You don't have a community or a network here. So now that you know that you have these 3 or 4 problems, you can do something about it rather than come here and think everything's going to be hunky-dory. No, I always say start with the problem Let's deal with the problem and let's be real with it. So those are like 3 or 4 things that you kind of have to consider. So from my perspective, I would say have a plan. It's quite good to have a plan because it gives you something to sort of work through. So, for example, like, do you need to get your degrees recognized? What's the step? What is the cost? Make a note of that. There are enough people who can tell you about those things. Do you need to get your language skills certificate, for example? Be prepared to do that. If you need to take language classes, do that. And I love that, you're doing this because as a way to
to improve our language skills.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, that's very realistic. So I love that. And also the big part is the network. We come here not knowing anybody. And I think that was something I did not do when I went to do my master's in Glasgow. What I did was I just sat and studied. I did not get to know anybody, and I thought my good grades will get me a job. And that was the biggest lie altogether, right? Mm-hmm. So when I came here, I knew that was not going to work. I really thought I really need to get to know people. Yes, I want to do great work, but I have to balance that out with also getting to know people, understanding what other people are doing, go to networking events, even though I feel awkward and I don't know anybody, just go and do it. Figure it out, right? So those are things that you kind of have to be prepared to do. And sometimes you have to do jobs that are going to pay the bills. That's completely fine. Everything leads to something. Nothing is a waste. That's my perspective. It will lead you somewhere. You just don't know where right now, and that's okay. Just do it because it's going to pay the bills and it will get you something later down the line. And sometimes there are opportunities that people will throw at you. Like, hey, do you want to come and talk at this thing? Do not say no. Say yes. Go do it. Just go do it. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be good at it. You just need to do it, right? So I think those are kind of the things I would say, like having a plan, being realistic that there are going to be 5 or 6 steps that you'll have to take depending on your background, where you've come from, depending on how your degrees are recognized. You might need to learn some new software skills, like, I don't know, Revit, ArchiCAD. I have no idea. You got to learn them. Whatever the industry is asking of you, get that. Those are easy things to do. So just do that and be prepared. And sometimes it means that you have to wait. You have to do a few things before you get that. And that's completely fine. Sometimes you get a job in a month and sometimes it takes 2 years. Everyone's story is different. And so I think, being really realistic and having a plan would really help. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. And now our very, very last question.
Yeah.
So I think we kind of already talked about a little bit about it, but since based on your experience and what you've learned and lived, what do you think is the future of architecture?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I was really thinking about that quite deeply. I think the future of architecture is probably 3 things. One is, to me, it is the circle. Thinking of architecture as not a square, but as a circle. What goes around comes around. What dies must live. What lives must die. And thinking of community within a circle. So for me, architecture is that metaphor that we're always in a circle and everything's constantly moving. And so that's one metaphor I can offer. The second one is the building is now architecture is going to become about unbuilding. So we are not going to have the kind of toolkit that we had before of different kinds of materials. We're actually going into shortage of materials, there's all kinds of things. So now the way we really need to think about architecture is how do we reuse? How do we adapt? How do we make our spaces flexible? So it's really in the unbuilding. Building is the last option. So that's kind of what I think. And the third one that I kind of offer is we're not there yet, but I think nature is going to be our building tool. And how we work with nature is going to really determine the future of everything. So I think those are kind of the three sort of thoughts I will leave over there.
I love it.
Love
I
it.
love
I
it.
think
Yes.
it would give us
Yes.
and
Yes.
to the audience a lot to think about.
Yes.
Really
Yes. Sure.
interesting.
Yeah. Sure. Actually, we share a lot of things that you mentioned before. I would like to continue this discussion,
Yeah,
but we are running.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
But I want to say thank you, Kavita.
Oh,
Thank you.
for
Thank you
having
so
me.
much.
Yes, thank you.
No.
No, thank you for coming here. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, your story. Thank you for being so humble and and so inspiring at the same time. Really appreciate that. I
No, thank you.
admire your
Yeah.
career. I believe your story, because you mentioned that like it's like a pessimist. I believe you said about exactly the opposite, because you are saying have a plan. This can be difficult, and I totally agree with that, because sometimes life, yes, is hard. So I agree with you. Have a plan,
Yeah.
to be realistic,
Cautiously optimistic.
optimistic.
I will go
love
with that.
that.
Cautiously optimistic. It's good to have caution. Yeah.
That's a very good middle point. No, thank you so much for coming
Oh,
today.
thank you
It
guys
was
for having
amazing.
me.
And yeah, of course, if another occasion we can share more thoughts would be lovely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Let
Yeah.
me know. Let me know what you guys need. Very happy to be part of this.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you. And thank you everyone to be there today. And follow us in our YouTube channel, in our social media, Instagram, LinkedIn.
Every social media and LinkedIn. We're very eager to know what you think about it. Leave it in the comments. And thank you so much for being with us this time.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.